If there's one thing that the Vikings are famous for, aside from their violent reputation, it's how far they travelled to trade and raid across the known world and beyond. For the most part, it was shipbuilding mastery which afforded them this international access, but not all trading required ocean voyages. In western Jutland, Denmark, cattle were renowned for high-quality meat. At around the age of 4, cattle were driven by farmers for up to 2 weeks to be sold in towns and hamlets. And in what is now Norway, inland folk had a high fish content diet, for people from the coast would travel far to trade fish for timber and other goods. However, every year as the weather improved and the winds changed, people across the world would travel from their homelands to meet and trade with others. And the Norse were no exception. For them, the conveyance of choice was the cargo ship, called a njord. In some ways these were similar to the famous Viking longships, sometimes called drakors or dragon ships. Both variants, for example, shared a clinker-built hull, that is where the axe-cut wooden planks overlap. But the Norse ship was special insomuch as it had a hull capable of carrying 24 tons of cargo up to 75 miles a day. Naturally, traders took food with them on their voyages, usually meat or fish which had been dried, salted or smoked. Drink, such as water, was probably held in skin bags, along with ale or sour milk stored in tubs. Food could usually only be cooked if the sailors were able to find land for the night. To this end they took with them a metal tripod from which to hang a pot to cook with. That said, it has been suggested that a fire could be burned safely on board the ship in a strong box built into the hull. As at home, grain and flour could easily be baked into flatbreads. But towards the end of a voyage, grain was instead diluted into a sort of gruel or porridge. It is entirely likely that cheese and also butter would have been packed when setting off, though these foods would have to be consumed fairly hastily so they didn't go bad in the sun. Now sailing was seasonal, and therefore apples might not have always been available, but when they were, doubtless they were taken on a voyage, along with other munchables such as nuts and berries. Also, doubtless arrival at a destination would afford immediate food benefits. Leif Erikson, for example, is famous for having sailed to Vinland, a place which we now think of as being North America. Why Vinland, I hear you cry? Well, possibly because he made a crude wine out of berries he found there. Wineland, Vinland. One of the most important and profitable trade routes for the Vikings was the so-called Eastern route. This took the Vikings into Russia and brought them into contact with trade parties from Persia and India, and eventually onto Byzantium, Constantinople itself. This cultured city was a crossroads of the world, linking the East with the West, a truly remarkable place, and a wonderful place to pick up spices. These included cumin, pepper, and saffron. To this day, one of the most expensive substances on the planet. In addition to this were ginger, cardamom, grains of paradise, and cloves. Not to mention aniseed, nutmeg, cinnamon, and bay leaves. These flavours would have been highly prized and valuable, though sadly there's not much evidence of these things making their way to Northern Europe. Perhaps they did, and they were consumed. Something which definitely did make the journey was wine from France and Germany, and in turn, of course, vinegar, excellent for flavouring food. Travel was therefore exciting, profitable, and though at times dangerous, full of opportunities for adventure and meeting new people. In addition to food and spices, though, other benefits of travel included garnering glassware fit for kings, jarls, and of course their merchants. Of course, the Vikings were famous for making excellent steel swords, though some were better than others, and of the thousands so far recovered, around 170 bear a very special name, the name of Ulfberth. This was in effect a brand name, akin to Ferrari. It showed that the sword was made from steel which had been formed in crucibles from Asia, where they could attain far greater heat and far purer metal than anyone could attain in Europe. Travel and trade, therefore, afforded access to greater opportunities in battle, as well as in cuisine. So, whether travel for trade or for the sake of adventure and exploration, the Vikings developed ways to ensure that they would be well fed on the journey. Voyages on the open sea were kept as short as possible, but when necessity called, they could improvise admirably. With this in mind, let's head over to the kitchen at 41 Feasts to see how bread dough might have been employed to form a makeshift oven for cooking a piece of salmon. Today's recipe is baked fish in bread.
Hello, today's Viking recipe is fish baked in a barley dough. For the fish, I'm using salmon. I'm going to season it with a bit of salt and pepper, and here's a batch of the barley dough that I've made before.
First, roll out the dough and then wrap it like a parcel around the fish.
So I've just unwrapped it a little bit to season it, because I'd forgotten earlier. There we go. And now I'll patch it back up again. This dough is a bit like pastry in that way. I'm sure it'll be fine just to patch it up together. Now, the Vikings would have put this directly into the hot coals of a fire. But for health and safety reasons, I'm going to use my oven. So I'm literally just putting it on a baking sheet, and I'm going to put it in the oven at 180 degrees for, I'm thinking 20 minutes to half an hour. So let's open it up and see how it looks. Ooh, that's looking very nice. This bread wouldn't be, the dough wouldn't be eaten, but it might be given to a dog or other animal, so it wouldn't be wasted. I'm just transferring a portion to the plate.
Oh, right, so salmon baked in bread dough. This is going to be interesting.
Away you go, Mark.
Okay. Let's see. It's good. I suppose, well, it's salmon, isn't it?
It tastes like salmon.
Surprisingly. But I suppose actually with this one, what we're after, I suppose, was the cooking technique itself,
yes.
Weren't we? You're almost using, as other groups around the world might use maybe leaves, or we might use foil, I suppose, or even
yes.
to a certain extent pastry.
Absolutely.
The contents is what was being eaten. I really wouldn't recommend eating the dough that was left behind.
No, not at all.
Very much like cardboard. But that's absolutely that's wonderful. Are you happy with it?
I'm very happy with it.
Excellent.
Great, thank you.
Wonderful. Well, as ever, if you want to know how to make this, the recipe is in the video information just below, to check that out, and do give it a go. As I say, it's more the technique which is interesting with this recipe, so we thought we'd explore it and show it to you. If you have any comments or thoughts, as ever, do comment below, and until next time, bye bye.
Goodbye.